Hey guys, it's us again.
What day is it? I
October
don't even know what day
2nd.
it is. October.
So today actually we plan to talk about completely something really different, and then we started talking about Agile on software
Yeah.
projects, and then we thought to actually explore some of the things about Agile in a software project. Budgetary things, scope things, and all sorts of. It's really interesting topic. A lot of people are trying to embrace Agile, I think, right now because of the budget savings, right? And because it comes across very lucrative in terms of like, oh, that means I'm not going to do this waterfall, which usually is associated with tons of money spent.
Yeah.
So what do you think about it, Ron?
I think it's great. I think it takes a big mindset leap on the part of the client to really understand Agile, though, to know what they're getting into. I mean, a client hears Agile, and the first thing that they think is, great, it's better for me.
Yeah.
I'll get a deliverable quicker.
Yeah.
That's great, but what you're also signing up for when you sign up for Agile is some other things too. For
Yeah.
example, the fact that we don't know all the requirements up front, and the requirements are not something that are possible to know up front,
Yeah.
and the requirements are ever changing. And we're okay with that.
Yeah.
We're okay with
You know what's my biggest pet peeve? People are using agile terminology like sprint,
Yeah.
but they're completely breaking the whole mentality. Like sprint for them is every week. Like sprint is supposed to be every month by month thing.
Well, month by month. Well,
It's not
I guess a
supposed
lot
to
of
be.
people say the typical sprint is a 2-week sprint, even. But even at that, the answer to the length of a sprint depends on the sizing of the user stories that you're throwing into a particular sprint.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a sprint with 1 or 2 user stories that are very large compared
Yeah.
to all my other user stories,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a 3-week sprint or a 4-week
Yeah.
sprint. It's not going to be or I could take 3 small user stories and put those into a 1-week sprint, and let's accomplish
But
that.
still, some parameters of a typical agile should exist, right? Like for example, what is sprint? It's a release,
Right.
Right. It's so also another thing that I find a lot of people, agile typically calls for very tightly knit kind of very senior team, right?
It does require a senior team
Right?
for what they typically
But
want.
what I see sometimes people are just putting like a bunch of junior resources. I'm like, dude, that's not agile anymore.
No, it's a recipe for
So-
disaster.
So here's the thing. When would you like? Can you say, okay, sorry, we're a company that only does agile, or is there like a right mix for the right type of project? I think there's a right mix for the right type of project.
I think there is too, but I think into that mix you need to throw in the personality of the client.
Yeah.
And
is the client ready?
the client might not be ready for it. And different clients will have a completely different expectation of what the mix you're going to have between traditional waterfall and agile is.
And a lot of people are looking at agile kind of like, oh, we're gonna get something like working really fast.
Right.
But so in terms of from a budget perspective, let's say someone came up to you and said, I need something to get done. Can we use agile? Because agile is a buzzword. Let's just use agile. It's better. I heard it's better in the news. It's
Right.
like it's all agile. Let's do agile. Why would we not do agile, right? What's the opposite of agile, by the way? Like in grammatics.
I don't know.
Just
rigid.
what?
The answer's
rigid? Like we don't want to be rigid. We just want to be agile, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so a lot of people are like, let's do agile, but and then like, how from a budgetary perspective, can you do a fixed price project with agile?
Yeah.
Like, what do you then?
Well, here's where I see agile as different from traditional
Yeah.
waterfall. In traditional waterfall, you always talk about the 3-legged stool
Yeah.
of scope and
Resources.
and budget. And then those 3 things impact your timeline. You can
Yeah.
fix one and then the other 2 move. And in agile, I think you talk about 4 things usually, right?
Yeah.
I think we talk about time,
Mhm.
Scope,
Yeah.
budget,
Yeah.
and quality.
Quality's got to be there, right? Like,
Quality
I'm
is a 4th
surprised-
item that we don't think about in a traditional one. And I think,
Could you say scope is the quality? Like, is quality in scope? I mean, you know,
well,
you can't
here's
say
the
that.
thing that I think happens with Agile that a lot of people don't think about often. And in a traditional waterfall project, people take those three variables and they say we can mix and match. Oh, you keep two constant, you can mix, you can change the variable of the other one, and then we can mix and match with this in any formula we want. And that's not the reality of what Agile should be. The only thing that can change in Agile is scope.
It's true.
I'm going to argue that budget's always fixed.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue that time should be fixed by your sprints.
Yeah.
And we're going to deliver something by this day. And in fact, if the project takes more than 6 months, I don't want to be a part of the project because
Right.
I know we're not going to end up delivering.
So technically, you can make a
And
fixed
quality's
price.
fixed.
Yeah.
Quality has to be good.
So I guess technically you can do a fixed price, right?
Yeah.
You just say that this is the amount of money that we have.
Yeah.
And then what? I guess you don't commit on scope. You say, well, if it's going to
No.
take. But
You
isn't that the
cannot
same
commit,
thing?
You cannot commit on scope because the scope is changing.
But isn't
what-
that the same thing as T&M? Like, what's different in time and materials? Time and materials, you say, well, I lend you these resources, and then you just use them, and then when we're done, then we're done. How is it different from time and materials? Robert, any thoughts?
I think the real difference between time and materials is time and materials probably has no real scope definition. Time and materials is becoming you do something. I think in a true agile project, you're doing a daily stand-up. You're looking at features in or out. You're doing your stand-up. You're putting stuff on a wall. You're deciding what you can fit in, or your sprint. So you have that more definition. It's how you run the project versus the time and material. Time and material is more of a come on site and we'll find some stuff for you to do, whether it be report writing or whatever, and we won't have a scope necessarily defined. We just know that we have a budget and we're going to do some stuff. We'll feed you work. Right?
Yeah. You know what's really interesting on that too is like I have an issue with a lot of time and material projects that I get thrown on where people will say, well, how can we even manage this contract at this point because we don't have a deliverable? And if you don't have a set of deliverables, you can't say whether you've met or not met to the client what they expected. And in fact, they can let you go from a project on time and materials and say, let's say they wanted to let go of you because they say you're not delivering. Delivering what? It was time and materials. And that's the difference with the Agile is we say, we're going to do this sprint. We've got this burn rate of hitting these items. And we can manage the expectation of the client on what they're going to get.
And a lot of
based on a burn
times,
rate.
time and materials projects, right? They don't have you don't give your project things like some control mechanisms like project manager, right? The client is the project manager,
Right.
And then you kind of like as we call it you get resources and brains on a stick, right? You get a couple of resources that you that just do work for you, and there is no timeline. You manage them, Mr. Client, right? So that's more time and materials. Where Agile is kind of like you're still running a project. You have a team. You're just kind of like as a client, you're prioritizing your own. So what's the perfect project for Agile? So here's what I think, and let me know if you agree with that.
Yeah,
I think perfect project for Agile is something. It's a startup. It's something that you're not sure about. It could be a startup within a well-established company, right? They're taking some risky product or some risky integration. They don't know they need agility, right? So it's either if your product is external product, it's a startup that you don't know how it's going to go.
It's great for all types of projects. I agree with you though. It does lend itself more to a
towards
startup.
risky, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I think so many companies would benefit if they get rid of this idea that you actually can get all the requirements up front, that you can actually design everything. Because the reality is, by the time you actually get to your build, 6 months, 3 months later, your requirements are going to change because you're going to start thinking of things or seeing things in a different light. But that's just not the real world. You know where I think I'd like to ask you this question then. You were saying Agile works great for a startup where stuff isn't good. I'm now of the mentality that Agile is the right answer for software development? I want to know, when is a traditional waterfall approach the right project management method?
I think, when the traditional...
Is Agile, sorry, I interrupt.
I know, it's okay. I'm used to that.
It's my job, I interrupt.
Just kidding.
Is Agile good for building a building?
I don't know. I don't think so, because customers are like, give me these like 2 floors and a stick.
I've decided.
Oh crap! I need
floor.
HVAC now. Yeah, it's kind of warm. Let's add
Yeah.
HVAC, and then it's too heavy. It's gonna fall.
I agree. And so you know what? If you're a project manager on a construction site, don't introduce Agile, because that's ridiculous. But that's where I think we're finding.
That's scope is heavily defined in that. You know exactly what you're building. You know exactly what's going to go into that project. You know there's going to be so many board feet. You know there's going to be so much plumbing that has to go into it. So that's a very defined scope.
Yeah.
Agile, like you say, if you started building a building and using the Agile approach, you'd end up with 6 different buildings patched together in the end. You wouldn't really know where you were going, which shouldn't scare people off of doing a CRM or a software project that way, because the reality is software, it does lend itself to that kind of malleable approach to things. People change as the software evolves, right? It evolves.
Software is not construction. And I think we're finally coming to a maturity model in this industry that we're realizing that we're not building a building with a fixed set of scope. Things have changed, and we finally hit it. And I just want to leap up and down and say hooray to that. And but if that doesn't mean there's not a set of deliverables. That doesn't mean a sprint doesn't have a set of user stories. It doesn't mean you don't do design.
Well, it also requires, sorry to cut you off, it requires the customer to know what they want, right? Because if the customer doesn't know what's the end goal, they don't know how to prioritize these things in the backlog, right? Technically, so I think for, if the customer, it has to be a small group. It can't be a decision by committee, I don't think. Like in Agile, right? There's very clearly defined roles too. Like you can't have, in Agile, it's usually a very small team. It's high performers, and it's very clearly defined roles. And you can't have like 5 people do that role. Because then, like if you, let's say the product manager, right? There's a product manager role. You can't have a committee of 10 people do a product manager. It's going to be a disaster. It's the decisions, because this whole point that as an Agile group, you have to be able to sit in one meeting and quickly kind of say, sorry, this one doesn't snap. This hand doesn't snap. It has to be a quick, quick decision. And you can't have like quick decisions like, okay, well, give us 2 weeks so we can organize everybody's schedule to be a committee.
Stand-up.
Exactly.
Be fast and furious. We make the decisions. We have estimates around it. We realize this isn't going to fit into our 2 week. We're going to have to pull that one out. It's going to have to go on to the parking lot. We'll pull that forward again when we have another sprint cycle, or it goes out completely because it just doesn't fit. So I think that's the difference. But I think the places where I've struggled with clients is I think a lot of clients have a lot of fear when they enter a project. They want to know what they're going to get on the other end, and even though it's an abstract concept to them, they want to have some sense of comfort as to what they might have on the other end. The idea of telling them that what we're going to do is we're going to build up a whole bunch of potential functionality in your system, and we're going to, it's either going to be in or out based on our the streams that we take and how we move this whole thing forward, scares some people. So it really is. You can say it's a leap of faith, and it's a very different type of approach to developing an application or software. But I think and again, it's not new; it's been around for a long time. But I think from a customer standpoint or somebody who's implementing, they should really think long and hard about how they approach the application and how they manage that whole process.
Who's to blame?
Ron's to blame.
Who's to blame if something's not
the customer,
not enough requirements?
The customer.
Is actually at that point,
which is not a good feeling if you're the customer. It's not a good feeling.
That's why you have to be mature. You have to be ready for it, and you have to accept it. Yeah, like just think of it this way: I'm gonna give you a $2 million sticker shock, or how about we're gonna build this super important stuff that you need first, and then you're gonna adjust the course as we go along, right? Versus kind of like, you're basically, this is now month number 8 out of our cycle or project cycle, and then things have changed on the market, but you're still working under design documentation built 8 months ago.
Right.
Right? And then design documentation, that's it, there's new competition. So just think of it this way, that's why I'm thinking it's for startups, mainly. All startups should do that, because think of it this way, 3 new competitor apps came out, and you're still building your app. First of all, your app shouldn't be 8-month cycle, right?
Yeah.
Second of all, if it is, then maybe you should have release 1, 2, 3. Like I remember my first time using LinkedIn, there wasn't even like functionality to like do anything with your unfriend people or whatever. Now there's functionality to do anything. Same with Twitter. There wasn't functionality to like do anything. Now there's all these options and all these things, and they react to the market, and they have to be agile. So I think if we were to summarize, because we got to summarize it for the guys, because we talked about so many different things.
All right.
So agile project can work on a fixed price. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. it
Requires
does.
a senior team.
Yes. You know what we didn't talk about?
Yeah.
That I want to add into this summary before you do it. Doing agile and doing a user story doesn't mean you get to skip design. At least if it's on a napkin, at least draw it out for the poor developer that's got to do the developing, or at least sketch it.
But they're
on the
also
whiteboard.
senior, right?
They're also senior.
I'm just
The other thing I would add, and I'm experiencing this right now with a client, is having this concept that projects have a definitive end. And the truth is, more often than not, software and application development is forever. It's ongoing. There's no such thing as an end. It's a program for a lot of people. So seeing your application development as a beginning and an end, and when we cut it off, that's the end of it, kind of sets you up for that lack of operational support and operational phase of the project where you do other things or additional phases to carry it forward. Right. The nice thing about the Agile approach is it starts the entire process out in this idea that it's like a continuous improvement program the entire way through, and it's a program, not a project. Right?
And you're still delivering because you got those sprints and you agreed to agree that you all agree and you stood up and you said you would do it, deliver these 3 or 4 stories as part of that sprint.
And the customer needs to be ready. So the customer needs to, your
interrupted
customer.
your summary.
Completely.
You were summarizing.
That's okay, because I have a mic. So I'm the guy with a mic, so I've just interrupted.
It's so,
I'm the interrupter. Anyway, so so what else? The customer needs to be aware, there's 4 legs to it, so be aware
quality,
of these 4 legs.
Yeah, and the only thing that changes is scope. And so we say time is going to be fixed. You're going to have some sprints. Your dollars are fixed, okay? And let's deliver something in this time period. Yeah. And if something's got to go, we're going to throw out 1 or 2 user stories. We're not going to compromise on quality, and we're not going to change the timeline or the price.
Agile coming in a store near you. Get on board.
I got no Agile one-liners.
All right, well, tune in for our next topic. What did we want to talk about originally? We want to talk about handling difficult...
Was there going to be drinks in the original talk? I have no drinks right now.
Oh,
No.
that sucks. Well, that's your lack of prep, Ron.
My lack of project.
We went agile in this video, so...
We took booze out of scope.
The booze was out of scope, the topic was out of scope. And what else? Yeah, like next time we want to talk about having difficult conversation with the customer.
Yeah, I
think
really
we
want to
should
talk
do
about that.
We should do a little bit of a role play where, anyway, tune in and
Hey, you know another topic that I'd love to cover?
no, definitely not.
Burn rate discussions with clients.
We have to do an intro.
Burn rate meaning how many,
How much time's left? How much money?
how is the team trending on how many user stories it can hit in a sprint?
Well, that's very agile specific.
It
So
is
now that
very
people
agile
know
specific, but
our agile-
it's very agile specific.
Can you translate it to waterfall? Like, what would that conversation be waterfall?
How quickly are we moving on the timeline?
Yeah. Are we on track? Are we on track?
And we're saying if we have this many user stories and we have this time, and what's our burn rate? Based on our burn rate, when will we complete all of our user
So that's
stories?
perfect. That's are we on track conversation, and that's one of the difficult conversations.
Yeah, and I think doing a burn down chart really helps to
Good.
alleviate
Even if-
that discussion with the client
Yeah.
because it puts it out on the table.
And how things have evolved and why were you not on time. Yeah, I think it's one of the difficult discussions that we actually plan for next video. So I was gonna say next week, and I'm like, ooh, it could be next week. It hopefully will be. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us again.
Hey, and thanks for coming out and seeing us.
Oh yeah, subscribe. Make sure to subscribe, and if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And click.
Hey, do you know what's happening?
Oh my God.
Purely CRM, we're going to be in our new office now.
Oh yeah.
So we may
Awesome.
not be in this. We've got an even bigger office now. Let's not pan out on the whole office here. But yeah, we're moving to new days.
Congratulations.
Very
Congratulations. Good job.
excited.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
See you guys.